Yes, that is, thank you. Hopefully some of these other ones won't take quite as long. The next issue, no, it's all been very good discussion, I'm sorry, I don't mean that in any detrimental way, but that was probably the most critical issue that was raised through public engagement. So the next one is the LifeMark and Homestar standards, which are being proposed for this chapter, and Scott's going to talk to you about that.
In general, the feedback that we received in the last round of consultation around the sustainability standards was from the organisations and departments that have had a hand in and have helped develop these standards over the years. Feedback on the whole has been compared to the intensification issue, low, but I would say that what we have had is quite supportive. The Green Building Council have made a submission where they talked about the process or the assessment process for LifeMark or Homestar in particular. Now, I invited earlier in the week, or I had discussions earlier in the week with a representative of LifeMark where he talked to me about their internal processes and their costs.
Sorry, so we've got them right. These are just different brandings of a kind of sustainability measures in home building?
Yes.
We'll just take you to the standards in the actual chapter so that you can view them.
Yes,
the LifeMark one is about accessibility into and around inside the house, and the Homestar one just briefly is about efficiency, energy efficiency, and other efficiencies.
Yeah. So if
10.
An example of the standards are on page 36 of the rules of the rules chapter. Yeah, these these are redrafted standards after my discussions with the Homestar representatives earlier in the week. We worked through the implications of trying to coordinate the resource consent or building consent process with certification with an outside organisation. And we talked to Auckland City Council, Auckland Unitary Authority have a flat LifeMark, Homestar standard in their requirements for five or more residential buildings in some circumstances. They are still working through a process in which they can undertake their statutory responsibilities through resource consent and building consent processes, but also build in a timely and efficient way the LifeMark certification. After the meeting and after discussions with other technical advisors, we felt that it would be much more direct and much more easier process if we took some of the Homestar standards and used them as rules directly in the plan that can be checked at building consent stage. And so if we look at 14.2.3.11, which is on page 36, and at 2, energy efficient building standards, so we're not actually referring to Homestar, but it was the Homestar people that directed me to these standards. We're looking at increased standards in terms of insulation, and increased standards in terms of extraction of moisture from kitchen and bathrooms, and then and then increased efficiency in terms of water use, and this is around taps and toilets and showers. So the WES is a labelling scheme developed by the Ministry for the Environment, and the R installation value is, as it says there, just a very well recognised and understood rating for the efficiency of insulation. So when a building consent application comes in, I expect that there would need to be a panel on that building consent, attached on that building consent, discussing how, where and how each of these matters have been attended to within the design.
So you can talk about the process up there.
Okay. Can't see it, unfortunately. I can't see it very well, but
Yeah.
there is a flow chart that we've put together. Green being actions on behalf of the building developer or building designer, and blue obviously actions by the Christchurch City Council. So at the very first step, the building designer will check to see that they have complied with these LifeMark or so shall we say sustainable building standards, and make that clear in their applications that they have. Would come in for building consent application or a project information memorandum check. Our planners and our building consent officers would then verify whether the particular standards have been met. If they haven't been achieved, the council has to issue the building consent anyway. So the building consent would be issued out the door, assuming it complied with the Building Act requirements. But we'd obligated to put a Section 37 certificate on it under the Building Act, which is essentially a note saying back to the designer saying that they haven't complied with certain parts of the district plan, and they can't give effect to the works until they do.
So have you talked this through with the building consent people?
I've talked it through with the resource consent guys. Unfortunately, I've not had a chance to, while I've been trying to make contact with the building consent people, they're obviously, for obvious reasons, are very busy at the moment.
They are, especially today.
Yes. And so then the designer has the option of redesign, or they can apply for a resource consent as a restricted discretionary activity.
I am totally in favour of people building energy efficient, water efficient, all those things, homes. But what I don't want to do is that we approve anything without it having gone through the actual practicalities of how this will operate in terms of building consents. As I said,
in terms of the checking, I've been through this with the resource consent staff who would be checking it. I understand. They are relatively comfortable. They are very simple checklists. But as I said, in terms of being able to have face-to-face time with the building consent manager, it's not been possible. Yeah.
We will. Yes, we will. I guess what we're looking for from you today is whether or not you're comfortable with having these two standards in here still. There's been a lot of discussion at previous meetings with you about them, and I think it was even a hotspot that was raised in our first meeting.
So, totally comfortable that what we build has to be energy efficient and water efficient and all those sorts of things. It makes perfect sense. No problem whatsoever. What I am totally uncomfortable with is that we do something that in some way doesn't work for our building consent people. So I want them to be all over it. And I want Peter Sparrow and Mark Ehrlich to be incredibly comfortable with this process and for them to have signed it off before we get it, basically.
We'll follow that up and give you their response.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree that the standards is something that we should be supporting. What we don't need is a cumbersome process that doesn't work and that slows things down. So really echoing what Vicky has said, the outcomes are great. We just need to make sure we have a process that works for everybody to get us there.
The issue will be too that there's a basic standard there, that you're comfortable that that's the level that we want to push people to. Some would go for a higher standard, some might seek a lower standard. But if they meet the standard that's in here currently, then it's simply permitted activity.
Permitted activity.
So how does it compare with what's...
Well, from my discussions with the Homestar people, that these, particularly the insulation values, are slightly higher. As they explained it to me, and it's in their written material on their website as well, is that the building code standards haven't really kept up with, particularly with South Island conditions, and that obviously the needs of houses in the South Island and their insulation, particularly their insulation needs and their access to sunlight needs, are probably higher than those that are mandated in the building code. They've also pointed out that we're looking at a LifeMark standard, and these deliver mostly a LifeMark standard of 6. That the average New Zealand home built through the building code is delivering something like 3 or 4 on their standards.
Very practical terms, so the wall insulation is slightly higher than what we currently allow. The ceiling insulation is slightly higher than what is currently allowed. The concrete slab, what difference does that make?
I'm not really sure, because I'm not really sure how concrete slabs work, but I expect that the rating value would be higher as well.
So perhaps in terms of practical outcomes, slightly higher cost to the house?
Yes, we've had...
Putting a bit more concrete on?
We have had some costings done through a firm called Jasmax, the same firm that did the costings for the Auckland Unitary Authority. The increase in cost would be, this is for a full LifeMarks, Homestar 6 standard, around about $2,500.
Based on these?
Yeah,
things.
yeah, based on these.
Do we normally require ventilation dedicated in the kitchen and bathroom?
No, we
Certainly not in the bathroom.
As I understand it from the building code, the standard is you have to have openable windows of an area of 5% of the floor area of the house.
That's a bit different in cost though, isn't it? Yeah. And what's the effect of those water efficiency things? Are they much more expensive or?
Well, all of those costings are set out in they're attached to the section 32 in this document.
I've got on here, it's the 6-star rating is $3,500 if you want to get a full 6-star rating. And that's, I think, quite an important part of the part I was wanting to raise, that I think that needs to be put out there for a house of 157 squares. For another $3,500, you get a full 6-star rating. I think we really need to make quite a lot of noise about that, because it's not a huge increase, but the ongoing self-sufficiency and energy efficiency of something that is actually quite significant.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I would also like to add that we've had some analysis that the payback period on that is in the vicinity of 2.5 to 3.5 years in terms of energy savings.
It's page 73 on your section 32 analysis.
First cell.
The first cell, the last 2 bullet points, that summarises it for you.
Because the building consent people are looking at, can we put solar panels on without a building consent? And there is a group who are keen to come and do solar panels by way of a lease in the city. Did you look at the possibility of making that in any way easier or encouraging that? And is that just not a district plan issue?
No.
Sorry.
The Resource Management Act can't set rules for the building consents.
Yeah, but we have also, in terms of our height recession planes, those that control that controls daylight emission into neighbouring properties. We have made some allowances or some exceptions for things like photovoltaic cells and the like to be added to a roof without the need to consult the neighbours, or they could be slightly through the recession plane. So in that sense, the district plan is trying to be more enabling. No, that's not amongst our retirement villages assessment matters.
Brick.
Right. Yes.
Well, they're all made of brick, and it's the same kind of brick, so.
Yeah, and in terms of one of the other subjects we wanted to talk about today as one of the hot spots, I guess, coming out of consultation was retirement villages, and the feedback that we had on retirement villages.
So just before I move into that though, sorry Scott, Lifemark and Homestar, yes, we will talk with building consent people and we will come back to you with their response as to how workable they consider this is. Were there any other outstanding issues with that?
To ask, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, if we were just, obviously we're at 1 at the moment. We've got really poor housing stock, not built for the conditions, unhealthy, unsustainable. Where would you rate what we're proposing in terms of that scale? Are we going to like a 9 out of 10? Are we going to 5 out of 10?
The range,
How sort of like, just in terms of a city being kind of modern, sustainable, given the unique opportunity we've got, how much would this take us ahead of, and be progressive versus just kind of catching up to what's just currently happening, but we're kind of a little bit behind?
the feedback and in the large. In your large feedback volumes, you'll see comment from the likes of Green Star, Homestar, and some health organisations as well, who make the comment that just these small changes will make a significant difference to the health and sustainability of Christchurch homes as well.
Yeah, it's a great improvement. Really support it. But how far does it take us versus what's happening around the rest of the world? In terms of, is it just catching up to what other cities do, or is it actually meaning that we're going to have this amazing, environmentally friendly, sustainable rebuild?
In terms of New Zealand, it's ahead of the curve, definitely. And the only other authority I know of who are exploring this is, as I said, the Auckland Unitary Authority. Certainly, but the building industry is becoming more and more interested in these standards as well, as they set I think a point of difference, a marketable difference for their homes as well. So in that sense, they're becoming more and more accepted. As a generality, I suspect, or anecdotally, I think New Zealand's probably behind the overseas marks in terms of sustainable buildings.
Perhaps I could just say that the Homestar standards range from 1 to 10, and this aims at achieving a 6 for residential homes.
And the current building code would achieve 4. So we are exceeding the building code, the national standard, but going a little bit.
In terms of the Sustainable Homes Working Party group, like, have they seen this? Has Tony Moore kind of given a view? I mean, I really support us doing as much as we possibly can without putting huge costs onto people and delaying consenting.
I have been developing this mechanism, these standards, through Tony. Tony's been my main point of contact with the external organisations like Lifemark and Homestar. So. He would probably want it to go. He would probably want it to go further into the full external assessment process. But at this stage, I'm not saying the council shouldn't go into a full external assessment process in the future. We need to. I think we need to see how the Auckland Unitary Authority is going to handle that.
Also mindful of comments from CJOG. You know, there's always this balance to maintain between wanting to move forward and have modern buildings and achieve certain standards versus their comment about having too many standards, having too many rules in the plan.
I'm quite interested in that external assessment, and I guess I'm a little bit unhappy waiting for Auckland. Like, we've got houses being, rebuilt now. So it seems to me there's a kind of timing thing. Like, we can't actually, in 50 years' time or 20 years' time, 30 years' time, which this plan is kind of envisaging,
Certainly.
I would want us to kind of be moving faster towards that. But it would be interesting to get Tony's view around.
We can get
what we
Tony's
do.
view, but I would say that we can always do a plan change at any time if there's a move from the community and the development sector that they want to even raise it even further. That's great, but an external assessment would impact on consents and would impact and be more costly for a consenter. What this is suggesting is we have at least a standard that gives you a 6 out of 10 that can be permitted if you meet it in your designs and doesn't require a consent. Once they move out of that and don't achieve that, then it becomes restricted discretionary. And if you add external assessment into that, it compounds things even more.